Hi, welcome to Steph's Kitchen. Tonight I'm going to show you how I have learnt to cover cakes with fondant. I must say that I don't claim to be anyway a professional baker. This is just how I've learnt to do it. And I am using the husband's new flash swivel recording device. So as I move this around, it's supposedly going to follow me around my kitchen. Here is my kitchen. Anyway, here's the stuff I've got already for the cake. Down here, obviously I have the cake, which we're going to cover. I have my fondant, I've got a rolling pin, I've got water, I've got jam, I have icing sugar, I have a butter knife, and I've got Glad wrap, all of which I'll be using as we go on.
What jam is it?
It's just a plain jam. It's not bitty or anything. It's as smooth as possible. We don't want fruit bits. It's just a strawberry jam. It really doesn't matter the flavour, so long as you don't have bits in it. You don't want big pieces of fruit. You just want the jelly. And I don't mean to push any kind of fondant. I've just chosen this one because it's vanilla flavour and actually tastes nice. Most people take the fondant off cakes, but this one actually tastes really good, so that's the one I'm using. So I have got this is just a 16-inch chocolate mud cake, which I cooked this morning and it's been left all day to go really cold. I've levelled it off and evened it up. 16 centimetre, sorry, 16 centimetre. And this is going to be, it's small because this is the top of a 100 cupcake tier, which I will be assembling this weekend, which we will do some videoing of as well. So the cake is nice and flat, which I've already organised. As far as getting your cake ready goes, you need to make sure that the surface is as smooth as possible. You don't need to be really, really fastidious because the fondant will be somewhat forgiving, but you do need to make sure that if you've got any major holes, dents or crevices, that you cover it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get out a little bit of fondant and I'm just going to use it to fill any of the holes that I can find. Okay, so I've got my fondant out of the container, and what I'm not using I have wrapped tightly in Glad wrap. You've got to remember with fondant that air is your enemy, so when you're not using it you've got to wrap it really tight. It will dry out and you want to keep it really nice and smooth and not get cracks. I should say when it comes to covering cakes, spend the money and get a decent fondant because average fondants will crack, they won't cover nicely, and if you want a good finish, spend the money. It's not a big difference. This tub can cost you anywhere from $15 to $20 depending where you buy it from. You can get rubbish stuff from the supermarket for about $8 or $9, so you be the judge of how you want to do it. Anyway, so I've just taken out a small bit of fondant, just a little piece here, because all I'm going to do is pull off tiny little bits, and there's a couple of little holes in the side, so you just want to take out a tiny piece, shove it in the hole, and just use your finger to smooth it over. I've got the icing sugar because if you have sticky hands or it's really humid or you don't have the air conditioner or anything like that, you're going to need to keep your fingers dry so the fondant doesn't stick to your fingers. So you can just use icing sugar as you would flour, but when you're trying to keep smooth, like if you're working with dough, but certainly don't use flour, use icing sugar. So I'm just going to go ahead and fill up some of these little holes as I go around to make it nice and smooth. Like I said, don't be too dramatic because you'll find holes everywhere as you look, but just fill up the major ones. Okay, so I'll get on this and report back in soon. Actually, I should try this one and see if it does taste nice. Okay. Not too bad. It's good. He's good. Okay, so I finished doing my cake with the fondant. As you can see, there are a few little patches around the place, and on top there's some stripes. I always use baking paper when I cook cakes, so sometimes you get crease marks. I just do them. But overall it didn't take me too long. It probably only took me about 5 or 6 minutes. Didn't take a long time. This is a mud cake, so they cook pretty flat. And when I cook my cakes, I always wrap around the tin with an old wet tea towel so that when it does cook, I don't get a big dome in the centre. It cooks nice and flat, so that's a good tip as well. If you're covering something like a fruit cake or a carrot cake, you're going to get massive amounts of holes because the fruit dimples the cake, and then it's going to look like a spotted cake before you cover it, but that's okay. Just takes you longer to do. Also, I should say that I've already got the cake on the actual decoration or the display plate, and before I put it on there, I put some jam down to make sure that the cake stayed in place. So onto our jam, and the other thing I should have mentioned that you need is a pastry brush. And what you're going to do now is you're going to cover the cake in the jam, because essentially this is the glue that is going to make the fondant stick to your cake. Without using a jam or something similar, if you just put the fondant on the cake, it would stay in place until it dried, and then it would literally lift off. So make sure you use jam. Traditionally, marzipan is used, but I detest the stuff. It tastes revolting, so I don't use it ever. You will taste it ever so slightly, so make sure that you don't use a jam that you don't like. Hair from pastry brush. And you don't want to use marmalade or anything like that. Make sure that you're sticking to straight jam. So I'm going to put this all over the top and all over the sides, and just brush it on so it's a nice thin layer so you can see it. So I'll go ahead and finish that off. Looky doke, cake is all covered in jam. It's all completely covered. You can see it's all shiny and sticky. Not a massive layer, just a thin layer. I'm just wiping off any ick and stick from the plate just with a damp paper towel. And then we're going to get straight on to preparing the fondant. Just dry that off as well, the dry side. We're ready to go. Okay, so with your fondant, make sure that it should go without saying that your counter is completely clean and extremely dry. You don't want it wet or damp. Get all the jam off from before. You just want to put a little bit of icing sugar down, the same way you would flour a surface if you were doing dough, but quite a bit less. You're not using anywhere as much. This just stops your fondant sticking to your counter, obviously. So the two secrets to getting a good fondant finish, firstly is getting a decent fondant, but secondly it's massaging it and working it and kneading it and getting it nice and smooth. Don't just roll it out and stick it on your cake. This is it. This is, how much is in here? I think it's 1 kilo. Can't find it. Anyway, I think this is about 1 kilo, and you should be able to cover up to a 20 centimetre cake with 1 kilo of fondant. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give it a nice knead, if you like, just to get it working, to break up all the, or just to break it up so it's not all crusty and sticking together. And your icing sugar.
Doesn't matter about the icing sugar getting on it?
No, because the icing sugar, it's designed to blend straight in with any sugar thing and just go smooth straight away. So as I'm doing this, I can feel that it's getting softer and smoother and slightly stickier. That's the beauty of sugar, especially icing sugar, is the more you work it, the smoother it gets. So it's getting nice and smooth. Can you see how smooth that's looking? Nice and glossy. So once you've given it a good massage, what what you want to do is get it into a nice ball as much as you can so that you can't see the crease lines. If you can see there's crease lines. See those crease lines? What you want to do is try and get them out the way you would if you were working a pastry or something, so that all those lines have gone, because they're the lines you don't want to see when you roll out. You don't want cracking. So roll it as best as you can. So what I've got here now is you shouldn't be able to see any creases. So it's just all like a pastry would look, or a dough. There's no creases at all, or dents that you can visibly see. It's all nice and smooth, you can see that. Then what I'm going to do is just get it sort of back into a ball shape. When you roll fondant and stick it on your cake, you have got one and one only opportunity to do it. If you stuff it up, if something goes wrong, that's the end of your fondant. You can't take it off and do it again. Because once it's on there, it gets jam, it gets cake bits, it gets whatever, so you've got to keep it completely clean. Don't roll your fondant, go to the toilet, make a cup of tea or anything. You can't get interrupted. Kids in bed, babysitter, whatever's required. And you do it in one go. Okay, so there's my fondant, icing sugar. Keep your hands nice and dry with the icing sugar as well. And I've got my rolling pin. This is my new one.
No matter what kind?
I've always used wooden ones, but this is like this is a sort of a ceramic one, which is generally what you should use for fondant. But you know, whatever works. It works with a wooden pin as well, as long as you've got something that you can roll it out with. In actual fact, I'm going to use my wooden one first because it's bigger. And then I'm going to use that one to finish off. When you roll your fondant out, the thickness really is up to you, but I sort of aim for around about 1 centimetre thick as a finished product. Before it goes on your cake, you want it to be a bit more than 1 centimetre thick because you're going to roll it once it's on your cake as well. Anyways, let's roll this out. So all we're going to do, which that's nice and smooth, is start rolling. And as you roll, you should get, I'll show you this in a second before I roll it too much further. But that top is absolutely beautiful and smooth. There's not a single crease or anything, crease marks or cracks you can see. Look how smooth that is. It's absolutely beautiful fondant, this. Really, really nice to work with. And the more you roll it, I mean, if you do have any little blemishes, they're just going to keep rolling out. Don't worry if you get icing sugar on it. Brush it off. Yeah, that's a little spot. That'll be right at the edge, so I'm not worried about that. If you do get little spots, as Greg just pointed out, you just pick them out. But if it's on the edge like that one, I'd just roll it because that's not going to be on the cake by the time I roll it out. Because if you pick that out, you can leave a finger mark. So just keep rolling. Don't touch the top. Once you're rolling, don't touch the top with your fingers again if you can avoid it. Make sure you're keeping lots of icing sugar underneath so it don't stick. If you're rolling out and you find cracks or something that you don't like, ball it up and start again. Fondant's really good like that, as long as it's not been on your cake. What is that? Okay. I can feel that that's about the thickness that I want, just about 1 centimetre or so. Certainly don't want it any thinner than that. There's a little thing in the, don't know what that is, but I've got to get that out. And like leaves little dents. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to ball that up and start again. as I was rolling out the fondant, there was something underneath the surface that was showing up.
There.
So we want a perfect finish. This is for a wedding cake, so I'm not cutting any corners. Make sure it comes out really nice. Okay. That's the nature of fondant. You've seen me do this. I'll come back when I've got it rolled out again. Okay, so I've rolled out my fondant again, got rid of that little icky blemish, and here we are. It's nice and smooth, and you can feel it, you can see it. Feels like nice smooth plastic. It's gorgeous. It's slightly thicker than I want it to be when it's finished, but as I put it on the cake, we're going to be rolling it further as we fit it. So make sure you don't roll it too thin, otherwise you've got nowhere to go once you put it on your cake. Alright. If you're covering a massive cake, you're going to need the aid of your rolling pin to help lift the fondant. But this is such a little cake that it's really just going to go on in one hit. Because it's rolled out so nice and smooth and nice and plasticky, there was a little couple of bits that just fell on top of it and they're just brushing off. That's the brilliant thing about fondant. Okay, so I'm just going to lift it up. So you're going to get it as centred as you can, and you just very gently place it on top. Rolling it on. Okay, rolling pin. So now it's on the cake. That is it. You can't take it off. What's that on there? That off. This is the fun part. Okay, so just give it a nice roll. And as you roll it on, you want to go over the side ever so gently. Roll it over the edge. And as you do that, it's going to move further and further down. The fondant is going to stick. And I've virtually got no pressure here at all. I'm just literally just rolling and the fondant is falling into place.
Where did you learn this from?
I actually did, in high school was the first place I did it actually. I did home economics, I think they called it back then. And they did cake decorating one time, and I absolutely loved it and took to it. And then, it was either that Christmas or the following Christmas, so I did Christmas cakes for everyone for the uncles and grandparents in my family. Okay, so I got to that far. Now you got to use your hands. Make sure they're not sticky at all. You don't want the fondant sticking to your fingers. Use your icing sugar. And all we're going to do is, for the size, we're just going to push it in. So it's hugging. Now you're not pushing down, you're pushing in to the cake. And as I'm pushing in, I'm working my hands further and further down so that they're getting towards the board, and I'm touching the board. Yet to see any cracking or anything, so this is really good. When I did Mason's birthday cake last year, his first birthday cake, I bought cheap fondant, and it got cracked. It was little cracks appeared all over it. No matter how much I rolled it, I couldn't get it out. All right, so now what you want to do is get your butter knife that I said I had earlier, and you want to cut the extra away, and you want to cut it out quite a ways because we're going to be sticking it in a bit. So leave yourself a bit of room. You can always go back and cut around it again. This is when a cake spinner would be a good investment. One of the things I could do with next in the kitchen, Greg.
Okay. I don't know what that is.
It's like a rotisserie. You can spin the cake. And this fondant that you're taking away, it doesn't have any jam or anything on it. Then you can just...
Children.
No. All that's had on it is icing sugar, so you can just wrap that up and use that. Probably not for decorating another cake, but for making flowers or other decorations. So the fondant that you're getting off the cake, just get it into a nice little ball so it's nice and smooth, and wrap it straight up. Don't leave it sitting out. The cake there is fine for a while. It's really important that you wrap up any extra fondant so the air is off it. Okay, so now I'm just going to continue to work the cake into the edges. If you've got too much, just cut more away. I'm just going to get the rolling pin out again and give it a slightly further roll. With the edge where the fondant meets the board, don't worry about it looking absolutely perfect. 99% of the time when you do a cake, you're going to be piping or putting ribbon or something around that's going to hide that edge. Very, very few cakes are left with showing the fondant actually going straight down. If you are doing one of those, and obviously you need to get it as nice as you can. Smooth it around. I find round cakes are easier to do than square. I mean, this bride's requested a round cake, which is great for me. But our wedding cakes were square when I did those. And when you're working the corners, it's a similar thing. You just use your roller, and as you squish the fondant down, you're just moulding it and cutting away the extra. Never folding over, never cutting on the corner, because you can't get rid of a crease or something once you do it. Okay. So I'm just going to go around and cut off some more of this and get the base looking, the edge looking nice and smooth, and then we'll come back. Actually, I just want to show you one of the things I'm doing. Just bring the thing down so that maybe you can see a bit more. Is as I'm going around the cake, I'm using the flat side of my butter knife and working downwards. I'm just very lightly pressing the bottom of the cake into the edge, and as it comes down to the board, if there's any leftover, I'm just pushing down and getting it away. So I'm getting a pretty decent finish there. I mean, I'm going to be putting ribbon around this anyway, but you can see that edge isn't looking too bad. Yeah, it's getting pretty close to the... So you just... That's where I find the butter knife so good. And I don't know what... Pretty much done. Nice and smooth all the way around. Now I'm just going to get very perfectionist. Look at it from lots of different angles. From the tops, from the sides. Make sure it's nice and round. Don't forget your rolling pin. Nice smooth edges. I'll probably fuss around with it for a little bit longer, but there you go. There's the fondant done on my cake top. Nice and smooth, nice and even. And we're going to go ahead and, I don't have the flowers finished for the top, but I'm going to put some of the side decorations on, which I'll show you in a minute. I'm just going to keep working on this for a bit and tidy up my board, and then I'll show you how I'm going to decorate the edges. Hey, welcome to Steph's Kitchen again. We've got our cake which is all covered, and now I'm going to show you just some of the basic decorations I do around the side. Here's our cake all done. I've cleaned the surface directly around the cake. In this instance, this cake is going to be the top of a cupcake tower, so I don't want it to be too busy. It's going to be fairly simple. I've got some ribbon here which is going to be going around the edge of the cake. I've got a template here to mark, which is a pre-cut template that I've measured out in centimetre lots, which I'll show you what I'm going to be doing with that in a minute. I've got some little edible diamantes which are going on the cake, and I've also got some pins which I'm going to be using to stick in the cake to hold while it sets. And I've got a bowl of water which we need to use, as I will show you in a minute. So the first thing you have to do when you're decorating is have a good look at your cake and decide which bit you want to be the back. In other words, which is the bit of the cake that you like the least. Or find the bit of the cake that looks the best and make that your front. Don't worry too much about the edge as it hits the board, because generally you're going to be piping or putting ribbon on it, as I'm going to be doing in this case. So I'm just going to decide which bit of the cake I want. Let that the front there. Okay, so that's going to be front of my cake. Yeah. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to stick the ribbon on. Now I've pre-cut it, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to be wetting it. We're just going to stick it on. It's going to overlap at the back a tiny bit, and I'm going to stick a pin in there. Actually, I'm going to overlap it at the front because I'm going to make a little bow out of the leftover ribbon, and that's going to hide the gap, the leftover ribbon. Right, in order to stick the ribbon on, I don't know if there is a recommended technique for this, but what I do is I just wet the fondant. So you're just going to use a little bit of water with your fingers and just put a tiny bit of water dip around the edge. Makes it ever so slightly sticky. Make sure you just put it on the edge, don't drip water anywhere else. Doesn't it? And Debs, I hope you watch this one day to see how your wedding cake was created. With much love and care. Okay. That's wet. Work pretty quickly because that'll dry. Just get off some of that excess water because we don't want the ribbon to be swimming in it. Right, I'll get my ribbon. I'm just going to stick it straight on. Guiding it. You don't want to push the fondant and put dents in it. After all the effort you've gone to making it nice and smooth and etc. Smooth around with your finger. And where it overlaps, depending on how you're finishing it off, you can either cut the overlap. What I'm going to do for now is I'm just going to stick a pin in there. I've only got about a centimetre and a half of overlap. Goodness, that's a long pin. I'm just going to stick that in there to hold it all in place. Go. That pin comes out later and obviously you won't see anything because the ribbon's on. There we are, so the ribbon on my cake. Go all the way down to the edge, so that gives you a nice finish. You can see that ribbon nice and clearly now. Nice and pretty. Okay, I'm happy with my ribbon now. That's where I want it. I've got the pin securing in place, but that'll dry pretty quickly. I'll just show you what I've done with the pin, where I've just overlapped it. I mean, it's a nice decorative pin, it's pretty. If that's the back of your cake, once that dries, you can leave it in or you can take it out. It really doesn't matter, but that's the back of the cake, so that's looking nice now. But in this instance, this is going to be the front of my cake, and with the leftover ribbon, I'm going to be making a bow. And what I'll be doing, I'll show you when I do it, is basically you make a tiny little, I don't want it too big, but I make a loop like that, which I will cut out. And then you're going to get a bit that's going to be cut out again, and it's just going to come over like this, and that'll be cut out and kind of stuck together. So that'll be the end, if you can see what I've done there. That's going to be cut out and stuck together, and that I'm just going to stick on with a bit of fondant directly over where I've put the pin. I'll do that later, that's not important right now. So that's on. All right, what I want to put on the edge above the ribbon is I'm going to do these little diamantes, and so that when it goes on, we want it to go on evenly. I've done a template. I've just used baking paper, and I've marked out centimetre spaces. I've got roughly 50 centimetres around the cake, and I've got 48 of these, so that's going to get me all the way around. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put the baking paper on where I want it. We're not going to use, we're not going to be pinning it around, or we're certainly not going to be wetting it because I want the finish to stay nice. I'm just going to get this on with a pin at the back, and then I'm going to, I'll show you what I'll do afterwards. So let me just go ahead and secure this. I really don't want to talk while I do it, so I'll get this on and then we'll come back. Okay, so I've just made an executive decision that I'm going to leave the cake for a little while before I do the template, because the fondant is still extremely soft and I don't want to risk putting dents in it. So I'm going to wait till that hardens up. I'll probably come back to it tomorrow, or maybe a bit later on tonight when it's firmed up a little, so that I'm not going to leave dents in it. But basically what's going to happen is this template's going to go around, and where I've got the markers, I'm going to be using my pin when it's on the fondant to actually prick holes in it. You can see I've got, it's going to be like one up there, one down there, one up there, one down there, one up, etc. And I'm just going to prick the hole with the pin and then take it out. Then when I take the template out, there will be little pricks all around the cake, and these little diamantes will be stuck directly on where the pricks are. So obviously you won't see the pricks, but by the time they're on, they will be perfectly spaced out and look nice and even and nice and professional, I guess, so that people aren't going to go, those things were just stuck on randomly. It's going to look all nice and straight. So I'll come back to this when I'm happy with how much firmer my fondant is. But for now, I'll sign off and speak to you soon.